Welcome to the SoccerWire podcast, the weekly news show that focuses on the state of youth soccer and player development in the United States. I'm your host, Mark Serber, and I'm excited to be back with you for episode number 2 on this Thursday, October 10th, 2019. In this week's episode, we'll check in again with managing editor Quinn Castile on the biggest headlines from SoccerWire.com this past week, dive deep on the current role of the college game for elite players, and an even deeper look at the proposed major change to the NCAA season structure with resident analyst and regular SoccerWire contributor Charles Boehm. Today will also mark the debut of our announcement of the latest college commitments reported on SoccerWire by producer Bridget Baker, and a quick chat with SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer on things he's heard on the wire this past week. But first, we want to thank everyone who's listened and commented on the first episode and encourage everyone to share, like, and subscribe, as well as reaching out to us on email at news@soccerwire.com with news, tips, comments, and your own college commitments news as well. So let's dive right into it with managing editor Quinn Castile. What are the main headlines on SoccerWire this week?
Thanks, Mark. First of all, the U.S. U17 men's national team roster has been announced for the 2019 FIFA U17 World Cup coming up in Brazil from October 26th to November 18th. Head coach Rafael Wicki called in 21 players to represent the U.S.
And obviously the name that jumps out at everyone has to be Gio Reyna.
Absolutely, yeah. Gio Reyna represented the U.S. At the CONCACAF U17 championship, led the team in goals, recently signed in Germany with Dortmund, and he's a top prospect for the U.S., should do great things at the World Cup.
And also, we're recording this in D.C., and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Griffin Yao from D.C. United, making this team really excited about him. I think the D.C. United did a great job fast-tracking him through the academy into Loudoun United and also getting minutes with DC United this year. And Brian Cayo as well, who just left DC United to play for Orange County in the USL. So plenty of local flavor around here as well. Moving over to the women's side, and obviously huge news this week coming out of Chicago.
Yeah, Jill Ellis coached her final game with the U.S. women's national team, finishes her career with a 106, 7-19 overall record. That's just 7 losses, 106 wins, 19 ties in 132 international games. She went undefeated in World Cup play, winning 2 World Cups. Overall at the World Cup, 23 wins, only 1 tie, no losses. Jill Ellis, only 53 years old, stepping down from the helm. So leads a lot of people to wonder, Mark, why is she stepping down at such a young age after 2 World Cup titles?
She's won 2 World Cup titles. What more is there to do other than to go for the hat trick? I think, first of all, you want to leave on top, and she's definitely doing that. She's leaving with the vibes feeling good. Her legacy is already cemented in stone. Her face should be on Mount Rushmore, in my opinion, for what she's done for this women's program. At the same time, we usually measure these things in cycles, from the 4-year period before a World Cup to the World Cup and through its conclusion. She's already been through 2 cycles, and she, having been around the block, even though she's only 53, understands that things get stale, that eventually a new voice needs to come in, somebody else needs to come in and rile up the program. But really the biggest questions now for the U.S. women's national team is, where do they go from here, and who are the candidates to take that could possibly be the next coach to take them to where they need to go, especially in an era where other countries are pumping money into the women's game and beginning to build the infrastructure that has been in U.S. women's soccer for so long. So I think those are topics that we're definitely going to see coming up, not only in the media, but right here on SoccerWire.com. So stay tuned. Quinn, further down the pipeline, speaking of what U.S. women's soccer is creative, U15 just called a new camp together too.
Yeah, the U15 girls national team is holding a ID camp this week in Kansas City. 59 top players from all over the country called in. 19 of those players from California, which is obviously the most of any state. And that's a really important camp for the future of women's soccer. That's where decisions are made that are going to fast track players that you're going to see their names coming up at the U17, U19 level over the next few years. And so there's some really, really key decisions that are going to be made at this camp as these players are fast-tracked for major opportunities that are going to set the course for the development of that talent pool for years. 4 clubs that I would like to mention had 3 players each, leading the way with 3 players each called in for the U15 camp. FC Dallas Youth, they're just a powerhouse in the girls' DA. San Jose Earthquakes are another strong DA club. PDA up in New Jersey, Players Development Academy, they have 3 players. They're in the ECNL. And Real SoCal, 3 players as well. They're a DA club.
And let me tell you, if you want to watch a team play the game the right way and absolutely dominate, watch the San Jose Earthquakes girls squads. They are unbelievable. Their U15s won the DA last year undefeated. And at the higher levels, I believe now probably the 16-17s or even the 17-18s, they have Sophie Jones, who's a player that I think in just a few years you are going to see with the full national team. Quinn, thank you so much. Excellent work as always. To read these stories and more, be sure to check out SoccerWire.com. Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, Player Maker. And when we come back, I'll be joined by Charles Boehm as we dive into the college game. Where does it stand in the U.S. soccer pipeline? And could we possibly see an extended season in the near future? The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by Player Maker, the lightweight device worn by soccer players on each foot to record every touch of the ball and every step. Within minutes of training or games, players and coaches get a report on every touch, including left and right foot usage, possessions, passing, and dozens more. Player Maker is the most holistic player performance approach that's never been seen before. Visit SoccerWire.com/PlayerMaker to schedule a demo. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast, your one-stop shop for weekly news headlines and in-depth discussion on the biggest issues facing the youth game today for the dreamers of college and national teams' opportunities tomorrow. And I'm joined now by SoccerWire contributor and MLSsoccer.com editor Charles Boehm, and I'm really excited to get into today's topic, the college game. Charles, it was once considered the final and an absolutely necessary step on a player's path to becoming a professional. But now with the U.S. Soccer Development Academy and especially the pipeline the MLS clubs have built with their USL teams, this is no longer really the case. In your opinion, where is college soccer in today's landscape and what function does it serve? Let's start with the men because I believe it is very different on the men's and women's side in terms of where college soccer stands.
Ooh, Mark, you hit me with another big one right off the bat here. There's no denying that the college game has dwindled in the consciousness of American soccer community in general, and I think it is undoubtedly has lost talent. There's been a talent drain because of the professionalization of the development system in general. And a lot of that, there's some self-inflicted wounds there because we have an unfortunate situation that we'll get more into in the coming minutes here about NCAA as an organization has not been college soccer's best friend. You're dealing with a really archaic schedule, and that leads to a really difficult reality. I mean, the college game, not just because of the different rules, everything from the clock to the refereeing to the substitution rules, not only are those things different, consciously and almost defiantly different from the rest of the game that, in this country and beyond, NCAA doesn't really seem that interested in helping in making the NCAA in its own college game better, more relevant. You have the physical toll that this compressed calendar inflicts. You have the limitations that NCAA rules impose, which are really sort of just translated over from other sports that don't have much relevance or value to the game, but they're still sort of the coaches and players in our NCAA college soccer system are straining underneath a lot of external limitations. So there's some reasons for hope in terms of the people within the college game who are attempting to reform and improve it. And I see some light on the horizon, but it's definitely been a decline over the last decade or two.
And let me make it clear, Charles, IMHO, or in my humble opinion, as the kids like to say today, I still believe that college soccer has a big part to play, that if you're a club or a development academy player that maybe needs maturing or you're not quite ready to break into a first team yet, college is an excellent place to go and get experience and refine your game. But now when bridges to the first team, USL sides, and quite frankly, the fact that it is now culturally acceptable for a kid to turn pro at 16 rather than go to college, something I think that was, really frowned upon even 5 to 10 years ago. The college game has lost its place as a destination for our country's premier players. And you see it in the MLS draft with teams passing up all their picks in the draft. Do MLS front offices and coaches believe this system is even capable of developing or helping to continue the maturation of pro players? I mean, let's think about it this way. My biggest thing even 5-10 years ago was if you are a 21-year-old rookie, you're going up against guys who are also 21, but they've already been pros for 6 to 7 years. And so you may be the same age, but one's a veteran and one's a rookie. And I think if you look at the success rate of guys who've been drafted by teams but then have not been signed even before the development academy came along, it wasn't that high of a percentage.
I think we have to be as accurate and careful as possible when we talk about the way things are, the way we'd like them to be, and what they are and why that is. So in the college game I think it will always be relevant, no matter how much talent it may lose, even if the schedule reform efforts fall short or are delayed. Even if every MLS club, every USL team, every professional team in the pyramid gets really good at talent identification and player development, which they haven't, they're not, and they probably won't all get to that level, not in our lifetimes at least, they would still miss out. The country is too big. It's too enormous. There's too many kids to catch everyone. So, and I get into these discussions every January when the MLS Super Draft comes around and people constantly are writing the obituaries for the draft and the relevance of college players. And yet, you look at the league this year, players like Hassani Dotson and Andrei Shinyashiki, college stars, who for one reason or another did not get identified or enter into the MLS Academy system. I mean, Hassani Dotson played for, I believe, Crossfire, right down the road from Seattle Sounders, somehow never gets into their system. And now he's a regular starter for Minnesota United, a playoff team, scored crucial goals for them. Andrei Shinyashiki has been one of the most productive players for the Colorado Rapids after a really prolific career at University of Denver. These players, whether they've come from abroad, and that's another thing, we talk about our players. I mean, American and Canadian developed players are not just competing for spots in the professional game. They have to compete with overseas imports in the college game. There's enormous influx over the last decade or so of international players. And that's not by accident. There's reasons for that, and we have to reckon with those, I think. But we're simply not going to get all the kids when they're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, even 20. So the college game right now, I think, has become a net that catches a lot of the kids who are missed out by our inefficient development system. And so in that regard, I think it still has inherent value. And now the question is, how can we improve? How can we chip away at some of the problems and try and get it on an upward trajectory again?
And one of the biggest changes, which we're going to talk about in our next segment, is the proposed change to a schedule that expands both the fall and spring semesters. But other than that, without teasing or stepping on kind of our next segment, what else could college soccer do to make itself a bit more prominent once again and to really sell itself as a place as, okay, you fell through the cracks, you didn't make it with an MLS Academy, or an MLS Academy didn't feel like they could sign you to a homegrown contract, or you're coming over from Europe and you have designs on playing in MLS, how can they sell? If you come here, we can help provide that for you.
Well, let's look at coaches for a moment. There's still really quality coaches in NCAA soccer, and again, it's not an accident. It's because in many cases the wages, the job security, the resources at their disposal at an ambitious college program are equal to or superior to what you might find in professional soccer, especially the lower divisions, which is kind of analogous in terms of a lot of these coaches' professional decisions. And then when you look at those same, once you have that sort of human capital, then you have to look at what they're able to do. So even now, with all the limitations, there's smart programs are for example, offering their players for guaranteed scholarships for 4 years. So even if you come and only play a semester or a season or stay a year or two, we're going to cover your entire tuition as long as you need to get your degree. It's going to be ready for you. Like you'll still have a home on our campus, even if you're taking classes virtually, even if you turn pro at 19. And I think that's a really smart idea. Maybe in some levels there's a financial cost to it, but that shows these kids that they believe in me. These coaches in the school care about me beyond just what I can do on the field. And I see pros doing this all the time now, and it's actually it's a fascinating thing to witness. Now, and then if the reform efforts make the college season into a 2-semester, effectively school year round format, that almost instantly could mobilize a lot of the incredible resources that our NCAA system can offer. I mean, there's international kids coming to college here for reasons. It's not just a good education; it's a professional style environment. It's fascinating to watch when even big clubs from overseas, when they come to the U.S. for preseason to train, and they walk into even a standard average Division I program, even a Division III program's facilities, the weight rooms, the performance, the physical sort of infrastructure that they have for making them perform at a high level, it's equal to or greater than what they have even in big leagues in Europe. So that's a resource there that I think if we can get people around the table, have a little bit of a pragmatism and a collective good mentality, you can really mobilize that for the better.
It just reminds me of when I lived in LA. Real Madrid, especially under Jose Mourinho, loved to come over during preseason and train at UCLA. So I think you have an excellent point there. Let's jump to the girls' side, and 2 things jump to mind right away. First, college is still getting the best youth players and are not losing players to the professional game, barring the likes of Lindsey Horan and Mallory Pugh. But I had the honor of calling the U20 Nike International friendlies, and when the U.S. faced France, what scared me was that every player on the U.S. was either in high school or college. And for France, every player, and the majority were 2 to 3 years younger than 20, are training every day with their professional clubs and have already featured for their club teams in France. Now that countries are building the infrastructures and creating pipelines to match that of the U.S., in which college was essentially the finishing school for our women's players, are our girls going to have to bypass college and turn pro at 16, 17 years old in order to make sure that the rest of the world doesn't not only catch up to, but surpass the U.S. in the future? For me, the biggest issue on the men's side was that our rookies were 21, like I said, going up against other 21-year-olds who had been pros for so long. And I fear that that's going to be the same issue on the girls' side as well in the near future, especially with the likes of leagues coming along in Argentina and Mexico.
I think the answer should be both, and it depends because you don't have to destroy one pathway to build another. Let's give players choices, and I have to respond to you by pointing out that there's lots of international players that come here to college. They look at their options overseas, whether it's in their home countries or wherever, and they decide that the NCAA college system is still the best developmental environment for them to be in. Now, I do expect that as the rest of the world embraces the women's game more wholeheartedly, that there will be more options. There'll be better players getting in those pro environments at an earlier age. But right now, there's huge gaps between rich and poor. There's still really top countries, competitive countries with great soccer cultures that have little to no opportunities to offer their young kids there. So why don't we let kids figure it out for themselves? Lindsey Horan clearly made the right choice. She was where she needed to be. That said, even Mallory Pugh probably benefited from the semester, 2 semesters she spent at school. She was trying to find her best way forward, and a flexible mentality, I think, served her well and will serve the system well in general.
So the women's game and the men's game, similar in style, similar in structure. Why has the women's game been such a better breeding ground for their players to go on and have national team professional success than the men's game? Is it just because of the infrastructure that's lacking in other countries versus the infrastructure that we do have for Major League Soccer teams?
So that's there's history and culture intertwined with this. I think our women are still in an environment, and when they come up in an elite youth setting, where college is still the goal. There's an enormous importance placed on that. There's a cultural ritual of commitment, right? And even some of these girls are committing at age 14, even younger in some cases. That shows you that they want to be part of this. They want to have the college experience. And that's valid. Even in NWSL, for the vast majority of their players, they're not making enough money to justify turning down what could be a $250,000 valued education. So I think we have to be honest with ourselves about what our girls want, and honestly what their parents want, because for better or for worse, mostly for worse, the parents are still enormous stakeholders, because the pay-to-play environment is funded so much so by their money.
Well, once again, this is kind of one of those topics that you could write whole books about, but we unfortunately don't have the studio all day, so we're going to have to leave it there. But when we come back, we will discuss the college season, which is currently compressed into about 4 months total. There's a push to extend the season into the spring. We'll take a look at the pros and cons and get some views from college coaches when we return. A quick word from our sponsor, PlayerMaker. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by PlayerMaker, the ultimate performance product for soccer teams and players. PlayerMaker is already being used by the world's top Premier League clubs, championship college teams, and now available for the youth market on a subscription basis. The PlayerMaker system records every touch of the ball and every step, providing information for coaches and players, such as total touches on the ball, right and left foot touches, possession times, distance covered, sprints, and passing completion, among many others. PlayerMaker data can help coaches at every level to plan their training sessions effectively. Every player receives feedback on their personal technical and physical training goals. For a demo of PlayerMaker, visit soccerwire.com/PlayerMaker. PlayerMaker, fast track player development. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast. I'm Mark Serber alongside Charles Boehm and C-Money. We talked about the decline of the college game over the last few years. Perhaps there's a solution to entice more players to go the educational route, and it involves the prospect of a longer season. And I could tell that you really enjoyed me calling you C-Money there.
Yeah, we'll have to workshop that one, Mark. But so those who follow the college game have been aware for several years now. There's been a movement. I think it's safe to call it that, although there's one person really at the heart of it or the head of it, and that's Sasha Sorovsky, the head coach of the men's program at University of Maryland. He came to this idea that rather than cramming the season into 3 or 4 months in the fall and being limited to really a restrictive spring training season, spread the same amount or even actually fewer games than you would play during a fall season now over the course of both the fall and spring semesters. Limit your midweek games to like one a semester or thereabouts, as opposed to every other week practically now. In some cases, they're going back to back to back to back with 2 or even 3 games in a week. Spread the season out. Let there be more quality, less physical toll on the players, less academic toll on the players. Just decompress the season, spread things out, and make it move more towards that year-round season, that professional environment, that consistent training environment that so many players want and need to maximize their ability in that key 18 to 22-year-old window. And so you're improving the experience of the players and coaches. You're improving the product on the field that you're trying to sell to fans, TV networks, sponsors, etc. Put your championship season in the best time of year weather-wise rather than the worst time of year, and make it a sort of help to close that gap a little bit in terms of the appeal and the structure for aspiring players. So he's been sort of as he calls it, leading a political campaign, and he really does. If you talk to Sasha about this, it's incredible. He's one of the most dogged, tenacious people I've ever met in this game, and there are quite a few of them in this game of ours, right? But he has got this elevator pitch or this sort of talking points that he will hit He's been relentless in pushing this, even though in the NCAA world you're dealing with what is a Byzantine system of complicated rules, committees. It takes forever to change it. It's the proverbial tanker turning times 10, and especially when you're a non-revenue sport, which is how NCAA approaches anything that's not football or basketball. And it seems, after several years of steady labor and trying to build consensus and get people on his side, he's gotten a strong majority of coaches and players in the men's Division I game in support of this. It appears that he's going to, and I won't put words in Sasha's mouth, but he sounds optimistic that the committee vote that he has coming up this coming April to adopt this season format for the 2022-2023 academic year. He'll get a vote on it in April. He just has to get a simple majority of the Division I programs and representatives to sign off on it. And he thinks that this could really happen. And to be honest, a lot of us doubted whether it was even going to get to this point when the idea first came around. It looks like we may at least, again, as I said, have a little bit of light on the horizon.
And two things that jumped out at me is I had a chance to talk to Lev Kirshner, the head coach of San Diego State University. And one of the other things he said is right now we are allowed to have 20 hours with our players per week, but that doesn't involve travel and the likes of that. So he said that if we actually extend this season for Sasha Sharovsky's proposal, is that it would actually go down to 18 hours. So even though the NCAA has already allocated 20 hours, players would have an extra 2 hours a week, which obviously doesn't sound that much. But in aggregate, and when you add in the fact that maybe they're going on a 12-hour round trip and a night off of campus, spending 2 days away for a midweek game, that's a lot more time for those kids to actually have a more normal student life and be more a part of the everyday life of the campus as well, which I think is important. Another thing a coach said to me, they said, first of all, when we have games in midweek, we're playing every 3 to 4 days, we can only really do film sessions with our players because tactically, everything physically is about recovery and regeneration. So tactically, we can't really work on it on the field. We have to work on it on video. The other thing they said, with everything going on in the season so compressed, their job is only 10% coaching. And I think this would give them more of a chance to actually be coaches and for players to actually get the work in on the field and really not only work on their technique, but understand the tactical side of the game as well.
Yeah, it's a fundamentally different mentality that these coaches have to adopt when they're in season. They try and get as much coaching when we're talking about tactical concepts, technical work in preseason and then in the spring season. But once your schedule sets in, really gets going in September, you're a triaged unit. You are getting your guys as healthy as they possibly can be, and you see it in the quality of play as you get towards the business end of the season. The tournament games, the ones that are on television that matter the most, where you're supposed to be putting your product front and center at its peak, physically, guys are just torn apart. I think for me, this is a no-brainer. The question is the politics, right? The question is getting not only coaches but ADs to sign off it. As of now, Sasha told me this week that the Division II and III coaches and ADs and the women's game are taking a wait-and-see attitude. So this is only going to happen if and when it happens anytime soon. It's only going to be D1. And then everybody's going to see how this goes. He actually thinks that some of the programs will go from being net revenue losses for their programs to being actually revenue generation. Again, you're making your product more valuable, easier to consume, more compelling. You're not competing as much with the busy fall and winter television and sports calendar. So I think there's just so much, and in a developmental context, it's all about getting guys towards that 10-month season, right? We made a big deal out of the DA going to 10 months, the professional environment, all the benefits of that, your training to game ratios. Why not do that with the college game? And then when you think about the guys that are playing PDL in the summer, you're starting to get to that 10-month season that you can be in from 12 to 22. That just makes sense. So it's fascinating to see. There will be various repercussions. There's a lot of logistics here. There's everything from sharing fields with other sports, all the scheduling that goes into it. There are challenges there, I think. But if you have the mentality that this is a must, this is not just good for our game, but this can save our college soccer game, then I think the can-do mentality starts to kick in. I don't have a word officially from MLS. MLS has expressed their support of this process, as has the U.S. Soccer Federation. They know that it has benefits in developmental terms. Will it kill the draft? we hear all the time about how the draft is dying anyway. I actually think this can resuscitate it in some ways. The timing will be an interesting question, right? Because as of now, the draft and the coaches' convention, they are the winter signpost, right? You have to be at those events, at those meetings. They're a place to gather for the wider soccer community. I think that will continue, even if it means that seniors or guys who want to join the draft have to decide between finishing their season and turning pro. I think that is best left to the individual. I mean, we already have players who stick around their campus or find a way to finish their school and their final semester while in their MLS or professional setting. So I think, again, if we give kids flexibility to choose, then we're broadening the road.
I kind of like the idea of moving the draft to after the college season because I know it's in the middle of the season, but say a college player gets picked. They were able to finish out the season. They were able to finish out school. And if MLS can create some sort of contract for these college players who come in on a draft that's already in season, then if they're good enough, they can be signed right away. If the MLS team thinks that they still need more work, then they can hold on to them through the end of the season, let them develop and be in that environment, and then bring them through the next preseason. And I think that way teams wouldn't have to decide whether or not to let college players go so quickly. You mentioned this earlier, and you said that a lot the women's game and the other divisions are kind of taking a wait-and-see approach. Where are the women's coaches on this issue, and perhaps why has kind of the party line from the women's side of the game been, let's take a wait and see?
Well, this proposal has a very prominent backer in Anson Dorrance, the UNC legend. He's spoken forcefully at some of the events Sasha has done in favor of this, and his attitude is, look, his message to his women's soccer peers is, we will be in their shoes, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years down the road. We will be where the men's game is, and if we don't, if we're reactive instead of proactive, we're going to suffer. The game is going to suffer. So the question, though, is the mentality, I think, is different. Right now, the women's college soccer is still arguably one of the best leagues in the world, even if you compare it to professional leagues. And there's some complacency, right? We see everything's bigger on the women's side. There's more scholarships, there's more programs, and that all tracks back to Title IX and all the backstory there. It's harder to get those figures in that environment to change because they feel like what they're doing is working pretty well. So I think there's a little bit of a natural complacency. The question is whether that's dangerous or well-founded.
So that vote will be April 2020. And Charles, I got to listen to your conversation with Sasha Swarovski, head coach at Maryland, and he said something that really struck me when talking about development. He said along the lines of, the proposal is not driven by MLS or U.S. Soccer. It's not even about the 50 or so kids who will go pro, but it's about the holistic student experience for the 5,000 or so kids who will play, as well as it being about recovery and academic balance. I love that he is thinking about every player, but among those who have a shot at going pro, do you think this might be the reason a kid on the brink decides to play in college versus trying to break in with a USL or MLS side?
I do, because you're talking about a set of pros and cons. There's a lot of personal development beyond the educational benefits you get later in life. There's a lot of personal development that happens at school. The kids that even get a year or two in college sometimes can appear to be more well-rounded individuals. They have a better toolkit for the challenges and the rigors of the professional game. So I think there's a holistic aspect to things here. And again, we have to try and recognize the resources, even if there are these obstacles that NCAA and others have sort of put up to block the full utilization of them.
Well, like most of these topics, we could discuss this until our producers, Bridget Baker's parents' cows come home on their cattle ranch in Kansas. But the rest of us don't have cows, and we also don't know when those cows are going to come home because I don't have Bridget's parents' number. But we will stay with the collegiate theme as we'll take a look at the top club players who've committed to universities in September. So stay with us to find out where they're going right after this. SoccerWire is the place for prospective recruits to list themselves and promote their profile to thousands of daily readers, including college coaches, scouts, and more. All recruits can list themselves for life for a small one-time fee. Already committed? Congratulations! All commitments can be reported for free and are included in our nationwide soccer recruiting and tournament wire to over 65,000 people each Thursday. Visit SoccerWire.com to create your player profile today. Welcome back to the weekly SoccerWire podcast. I'm joined now by our producer, Bridget Baker, bringing you all of the SoccerWire college commitments from the month of September.
Thanks, Mark. And I do just want to point out it is my aunt and uncle back home in Kansas with the cows, not my parents.
My apologies to your mom and dad and also to your aunt and uncle.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say congratulations to all those that committed their college commitments to us this last month. Starting off with the class of 2020, Jason Pereira, a defender from PDA, has committed to Providence College. Austin Yao, a defender midfielder for Phoenix Rising FC, has committed to Belmont University. Midfielder Brevin Andrades from King's Hammer has committed to West Virginia University. Ashley Lockard, a keeper for the St. James FC Virginia, has committed to Virginia Wesleyan University. Defender Casey Mers from Maryland United FC has committed to the University of Richmond. Another commitment coming out of PDA is Sydney Urban, a midfielder committing to the University of Florida, and Alyssa Spring, a forward midfielder for Western New York Flash Academy, has committed to the St. Bonaventure University. Moving on to the class of 2021, Jamie Dermata, a Northern Steel midfielder, has committed to Slippery Rock University. Midfielder Nikki Clark from Palo Alto SC is committing to Humboldt State University. Danielle Shahan, a defender for BRYC Elite, has committed to Stetson University. Keeper Alexa Evangelista from Tampa Bay United is committing to Fordham University. And Brooke Steele, a forward midfielder for FC Delco, is committing to American University.
Thanks, Bridget, and congratulations to everyone that committed last month. As a reminder, commitments can submit their commitment to SoccerWire completely free. Go to SoccerWire.com/recruiting to submit commitment news today. And finally, let's touch base with SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer on things he's quote-unquote heard on the wire this week. Chris, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Mark. I've got 3 quick topics that caught my attention this week, and I'd love to hear what everyone here thinks. Number 1, we had a proud but disturbed mom reach out this week about her Development Academy daughter not being allowed to participate in her high school signing ceremony. This has become more common than we might think because I know personally of some others. The athletic director said that a child who spent 4 years at their high school but is playing at the top of her game and got a full ride to a major university on the West Coast was not allowed to be with her classmates in a big school ceremony celebrating her scholarship. I don't like it. I think it's a political statement by ADs. You could see the other side. I think as a high school coach, myself in the past, the thought was the players are committed to be on the high school team, so they shouldn't be sort of lowered, by allowing somebody who didn't commit to their high school, if you will. But the realities are it's an elite level of play, and the player had no choice. I just don't like it.
I think at the other time, too, Chris, to piggyback on your statement, is the fact that she put in the 4 years of work academically. So what if she's not on the high school soccer team? She was at that school. She represents that school. She's a part of the school. She did exactly what she was supposed to do in school, is graduating, and is going to play soccer at a major college. And whether she was on the high school team or not, she should get that recognition. So I think it's disastrous that they won't let her be a part of National Signing Day.
Yeah, I think it's basically mean and spiteful. It's the school trying to use people as an example, in my opinion. It's just, I don't like it.
And even though she didn't play for that school, she's still a great example for the school. So she should be used as an example, but positively.
It's probably pressure from the parents and the coaches of the kids that do play there that just don't have perspective on the level of play and the level of achievement.
And also, by doing this, they're disregarding all of the sacrifices and commitment that she had to make to play at the Development Academy level. We talk about, they're not allowing these girls to play, and so the AD's punishing her. In fact, she's already felt all the pain and all the just the stress about the fact that she had to make that decision. and she made that sacrifice and that commitment for herself. And the fact that she had to go through that, I think she should be honored for that, whether it's by her college by her high school or someone else. But I think the high school should recommend that even though she didn't play for her, she did make that sacrifice, and she already had to go through those bad feelings of not being able to play high school. So this AD is just putting her through it again, and I think that's really unfair.
And again, it's not this one, but so I have told her we will promote it. So, and this goes for everybody. And the top clubs do their own. They've been forced to do their own signing ceremonies now because this is happening all over the country. But send us your signing ceremony photos from your development academy or club or anybody who just chooses not to play high school and commit to an ECNL team or NPL team on the boys' side or anything, and we will absolutely celebrate your signing.
And I think we do, before we get on the second story, Chris, we have another topic for a show, and that is whether or not kids who are in the DA or play high-level soccer, the controversy surrounding the fact that they're not allowed to play high school soccer and whether that's good or bad. We need to look at the pros and cons of both of those because have a lot of 280 character spats about it on Twitter, but I think that needs to be its own show.
Yep, absolutely. Great. So number 2, this is kind of strange, and we're here in Northern Virginia, or DC area, we've mentioned a couple of times, and I know a lot of really great people at the Virginia Youth Soccer Association, which is the U.S. Youth Soccer Aligned State Association of the 55. That was the only way that soccer was organized in this country before U.S. club soccer came on the scene. But the Virginia Youth Soccer Association has recently announced that they are launching an esports league. And we all know esports is coming. There's scholarships programs going on in schools, and there's high schools. Or the VHSL, the Virginia High School League, is also now sanctioning, or they're going to vote this offseason to create official high school sports as e-gaming, as a sport. That's fantastic. But in standing on some sidelines this week and talking to a bunch of pretty high-level coaches at some top clubs, the common issue is, why is our Youth Soccer State Association encouraging kids to come inside and start looking at rectangular screens instead of being outside kicking a soccer ball? It doesn't seem like the two go together. I don't get it.
I actually kind of disagree with that. I feel a couple reasons. One, like you said, it's coming. 2, I think that Virginia Youth Soccer Association has to make money, and this is a way that they can monetize. 3, although I understand why parents and staff would be upset about this, I really do feel that if you have a kid who would rather be an e-gamer than play, they already don't have the mentality to want to be outside, to want to be a soccer player, and therefore it's more forced exercise. So let them do their thing. And finally, the thing I'll say about it is if VYSA and other clubs around the country can monetize this, then perhaps they can use this money to reduce the pay-for-play model, and that might actually help our player development. Producer Bridget Baker, you have something you want to say, and then our managing editor, Quinn Castile, wants to get in on this one as well.
Yeah, I just want to say I am a huge fan of the esports, and just keeping on that money topic, the winner of the 2019 FIFA eWorld Cup is going to take home $250,000, with second place earning $100,000. So there's obviously a huge amount of prize money at stake here. And as these leagues start developing even at such a small level, there's so much money that they're going to be able to make that can benefit other aspects of their organization moving forward.
I agree, and I think VYSA at the youth level is pretty much just following suit, where you have EMLS, where each MLS club has a representative at the esports level playing FIFA. And also in terms of the physical activity, going outside aspect of it, pretty much all professional athletes these days, whether it's NFL players playing Madden or soccer players playing FIFA, they almost all play these video games and use themselves and things like that and play against their teammates. And so I think that, when you're recovering from games or just having leisure time off the field, it's actually a great way to stay plugged into the sport and think about tactics and how to play and just theory behind the game. And just another way, I think, in this modern technology-based world to, celebrate a passion for the game.
Chris, it's 3 against 1. So before we go on to story number 3, do you want to have a rebuttal?
I was going to, no matter what. Yes, I think the arguments that it generates revenue. Well, then why not just start trading stocks or open a restaurant or something like that? I mean, it's a non-for-profit organizations have a mission, and they're supposed to be pursuing that mission. And I think encouraging starting new ventures that aren't encouraging what the organization was founded on is something that should be discussed. It's not clear to me that it's only soccer that is the e-gaming. So, again, I this was a heard on the wire thing. I wanted to bring it up to talk about. I'm sure there's details. Like I said, it's probably going to be fine. I just hope they don't use money that's already in the coffers to invest in something that's a new venture, because that money was collected from kids who kick balls and not from kids who click buttons as much. So.
Fair enough. We have to move on. Story number 3, Chris.
So this is more of a local. We keep talking about local stuff, so we really do. I would love to have a lot more engagement. We have a lot of readers from all over the country. In fact, Illinois, the Chicagoland area, is actually more traffic on our website than the D.C. area where we're all physically based mostly. But I digress on that. But this is a quick shout out to the Southwestern Youth Association. SYA is here in Northern Virginia. It's actually the home to Jill Ellis's brother, Paul. He's been there for decades, I think. Paul, if it's been less than that, I apologize. It's been at least 10 years. They're planning a U8 scrimmage fest this fall in November, and it's completely free. And this is U8, as you know, this is the time where you get the clubs all have these young academies, and they want to sort of get the kids together and play competitive matches before they start rolling into the tryout season to form that first level of official travel at U9. And there's all over the country. It's sort of also the beginning of when organizations start to try to monetize soccer tournaments. So it gets pretty expensive. And since they're U8s, these kids all over the country usually get thrown on not very good fields and have to pay a couple $100s. And it's the first experience for parents and kids of wearing the club jersey and going and playing against other clubs. And for SYSA to decide to make this big soccer celebration and to get sponsors to do this for free, I just thought it was fantastic. So I wanted to shout out to them for that.
I think that's great. And also some of the things that you had added just in our show notes is that the supporters groups of Loudoun United, DC United's USL team, is going to be there helping out, and that there's going to be free meals for these players. And I think, one of the things that I personally get so caught up in is player development, producing players for the future. How can we win a World Cup one day? And you look at these 8-year-olds, and we have to remember that soccer's fun. And we talk a lot about changing the culture. And the only way we're going to change the culture is if soccer's fun. And these kids want to dive into it. So I think, like you said, there are so many reasons to get behind this. But just the fact that it's all about the fun and letting these kids have a day out that they can enjoy and really learn to fall in love with the game, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and for any cynics out there, I did forget to mention that in the show notes, that think, oh, well, that's a ploy to expose their club. It's not. It's they're having moon bounces. They're having DC United out, Talons out, and I'll put a little pressure on Washington Spirit, who I have close to my heart, but they're considering trying to make it happen. So hopefully they show up too. But it's just, when I talked to the people yesterday, they just hadn't committed. But I'm sure the Spirit will be there, and so it's really good. It sounds very legit to me, and they want to make it a regular thing, and they want to make it a festival and celebration of soccer. I know I said 3, but there's one more thing. It was sort of the game, I think, was still going on while we were starting recording, but it should be mentioned in my mind that in the country of Iran, they actually allowed women to attend the national team game for the first time. And they sold over 3,000 tickets. And there was a great story on NPR as I was driving in here talking about it, but I already put it in the notes as well. But the pressure that it finally took is tragic. There's a young lady in Iran that dressed up like a boy to get into a game. She was, I guess, caught or found out or afterwards, however that happened. I apologize. Don't know the whole details. She was facing trial for this and jail time, and she set herself on fire and basically committed suicide. And that seems to have been, if there's any good out of that at all, it's that it got the enough global attention that the Federation and FIFA got involved. They finally allowed women to attend games there. I just hope, for the sake of soccer and for the sake of women all over the world, that everybody keeps paying attention and that they continue to be allowed to attend the games.
And I know that this is not an official news source, but I did see on Twitter that apparently Iran, who last time I checked were winning 7-0 in the game, that the players apparently celebrated the first goal in front of the women's section. So I think that's really awesome and a fitting tribute to this woman and what she's potentially opened up for women in Iran and their ability to celebrate and partake in the world's beautiful game.
Well, I certainly hope that there's a stadium named after her in the future when they finally really come around to true freedom.
Well, excellent stuff, Chris. Thank you so much for these stories and coverage of everything youth soccer. Be sure to check SoccerWire.com, your premier location for the best coverage of the youth game. If there's something we missed or a topic that you would like discussed, hit us up on Twitter at @TheSoccerWire or hop over to SoccerWire.com and click on the Contact Us link on the bottom of any page. Every Thursday, we put out our National Soccer Recruiting and Tournament Wire, and for those of you in the Mid-Atlantic or Tri-State regions, we send twice weekly local news roundups. Just click on the newsletter link on SoccerWire.com to get the best of SoccerWire.com's in your inbox. That will do it for this edition of the SoccerWire podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. For Quinn Castile, Charles Boehm, Chris Hummer, and our producer, Bridget Baker, I'm Mark Serber saying thank you for joining us on the SoccerWire podcast.